The Nation at 9, a special edition of The Nation at 9. My colleague Geeta will be joining us in just a bit. We, of course, are talking about the perceived shift in the Trump administration's policy towards India and Pakistan and Indo Pak relations. Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, gave inputs on this, and she said that the United States is looking to find its place in efforts to de-escalate Indo-Pak tension. Now, this is, Geeta, a departure from the previous Obama administration. They, of course, had maintained a status quo on this. They had said that whatever scope, pace, and area of Indo-Pakistan peace, they have to do themselves, I beg your pardon. Trump seems to be looking at a different direction.
Absolutely. President Donald Trump's very own ambassador to the United Nations has come out and said that there could be mediation if needed from the United States of America. Of course, this was a question posed by a journalist from Pakistan in New York, and a leading question. She fell straight into it, Athar, and we will have to wait and see what the U.S. administration will be doing. But for now, the Indian administration has reacted very sharply, saying bilateral issues between India and Pakistan will have to be dealt with bilaterally.
And the journalist in question did point to India's position, saying that India is completely opposed to any such stance, and since then, Indian Ministry of External Affairs has also made it stand very clear, saying no interference in any relations with Pakistan. That includes the Kashmir issue as well. We put together the story for you. Take a look. We'll come right back to our panel.
From Bill Clinton to George Bush and even Barack Obama, no US president ever interfered in India's internal affairs, especially in Kashmir. But with Trump and team comes a twist that has gotten India hot under the collar.
Absolutely right, and this administration is concerned about the relationship between India and Pakistan, and very much wants to see how we de-escalate any sort of conflict going forward. So I would expect that the administration is going to be in talks and try and find its place to be a part of that.
India was clearly not pleased with an MEA statement nipping all hopes of Trump and his team in the bud.
It's a bilateral issue, and all these bilateral issues would have to be dealt with bilaterally. There can be no third-party intervention. That's the statement and response of the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Gopal Bagle to Ambassador Nikki Haley's statement and remarks on Indo-Pak ties.
Are we going to have people that veto certain issues? Yes. But that doesn't preclude the United States from acting. And it certainly doesn't preclude us from trying to see if we can change that as well. So our goal is to get more done together than we do separately. The administration is concerned about the relationship between India and Pakistan, and very much wants to see how we de-escalate any sort of conflict going forward. So I would expect that the administration is going to be in talks and try and find its place to be a part of that. We don't think we should wait until something happens.
Precondition is only one, and that is that Pakistan should come clean on terrorism, and after that probably anything can happen and talks can happen.
Bilateral मामला है, ये दो देशों के बीच का मामला है, उसमें भी पाकिस्तान कहां तक सही है, इस पर बहुत बड़े प्रश्न लगते हैं.
Our Prime Minister has made a statement that CPC is going through part of India. POK is part of India. Therefore, President Trump says many things, but we'll have to see where he can succeed on this very difficult issue.
Pakistan, on the other hand, has been very keen on a mediation by UN or by the European Union or by the United States. But India stuck to its stance that there will be no question of anything other than violence.
As Team Trump goes off the line, claiming that they won't watch things escalate between India and Pakistan, the onus is now on Donald. Will he trump terror or only end up meddling in Kashmir? With Geeta Mohan in New Delhi, Bureau Report, NewsX.
All right, Professor Madhav Nalapat joins us today, Journal Director of the Sunday Guardian. He's here with me in the studio. Simon Marks, correspondent of NewsX from Washington, D.C. will be joining us. Arvind Gupta, spokesperson of the BJP. Also Vivek Katju, former MEA Secretary. He joins us. Pramit Pal Chaudahri will be here, Foreign Affairs Editor of the Hindustan Times. And completing the panel will be Sanjay, National Spokesperson of the Congress Party, and Professor Sumit Ganguly, Professor of Political Science at the Indiana University. He joins us via Skype. Thank you all for being with us. Simon Marks, let me start it off with you. This is a departure, really. Nikki Haley has changed her own previous stance. When asked about this before, she had maintained an ambivalent sort of a response. Now, she sort of walked into that question and said that the U.S. might be trying to find its place. Now, since the mid-90s, perhaps when Clinton was Secretary of State, then the U.S. had expressed some interest, but pretty much throughout the Obama administration, the U.S. had kept a hands-off approach to Indo-Pakistan relationships. Is this yet another, perhaps an attempt by the Trump administration to score some points, make their presence felt internationally, because domestically he's moving from scandal to scandal?
Look, I think the honest answer to the question is we don't know, and we don't know for one very simple reason. It is unclear whether when Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, speaks, she is actually reflecting the viewpoint of the president that she serves, President Donald Trump. Now, that may sound crazy, because normally, whenever a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations speaks, they are absolutely reflecting the viewpoint of the president that they serve. But Nikki Haley is a relative newcomer to the international scene. She's not steeped in foreign policy. And we saw just a matter of 10 days ago, she hit very hard on television here in an interview at the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And when she was asked by a television interviewer, well, are you reflecting the president's thinking over Russia? She said, I don't know. I'm not going to be drawn on that because I don't know what's in his mind on the issue of Russia. If she doesn't know what's in his mind on the issue of Russia, does she actually know what's in his mind on the issue of India,
before I get my colleagues in, just
Pakistan,
inserting one question there, before I get Geeta and my other colleagues in on the panel, just one question there. Given the fact that the Trump administration is just finding its bearings, even now, perhaps more than 2 months after he got elected president and sworn in as president, do you believe that the top leadership, if you look at Rex Tillerson, he's been maintaining a very low profile. He's been not really publicly out there making statements at all. And this coming from Nikki Haley, it would be safe to assume that this is not really a pivot or a change of stance. This is perhaps the utterings of Nikki Haley, who is a U.S. official there, but perhaps might or might not have the complete backing of the Trump White House.
Well, I think that's the key issue. There's only a couple of ways this can play out. If she is reflecting the thinking of President Trump, then it does appear to suggest a shift in the U.S. approach to India and Pakistan and a move away from a traditional situation in which the U.S. has said this is a bilateral issue for the two countries to solve themselves. If, however, she's extemporizing and freelancing and wasn't expecting the question that was asked at the press conference and was saying to herself, well, how do I answer that in a cogent way? If it's the latter, then it may not be that kind of dramatic departure. There's no question that the State Department is now substantially less important in the formulation of U.S. foreign policy than it has traditionally been. The locus of power here is absolutely the White House.
Right, stay on. Geeta Mohan joins us on the panel, as well as Professor Madhav Nalapat. Geeta, of course, the fact that Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, was far more for engaging in world issues there as well. Trump came off as a bit of an isolationist. This is slightly different language. And Simon is with us.
Well, absolutely. I'd like to ask a question to Simon. Simon, if I could come to you. There has been a sharp reaction from the Indian side, very clearly spelling out that Indo-Pak ties are a bilateral matter and any outstanding issue has to be dealt with bilaterally. Any response from DC yet? Has the State Department reacted to Nikki Haley's statement? Because that is going to be crucial and important to know where the State Department really stands.
Yeah, no response at all, and we may not get one in the next few hours. The White House has made it clear that this is a day when President Trump himself is focusing on the economy. He's hosting a roundtable with business leaders here in Washington, D.C. There is no White House press briefing currently expected today, and there hasn't been a State Department press briefing for days. To all intents and purposes, the media department, the media relations department of the State Department is at this point mothballed, while a new spokeswoman that they've just hired there bones up on all the issues that she's going to have to confront on a daily basis whenever she does brief the media. So we simply don't know at this point. Next time the White House spokesman does brief reporters will be our first opportunity to ask.
All right, stay on, Simon. We'll also introduce the rest of the panel here. Professor Nalapat, very clearly, these are, as Simon was clearly saying, this is not really ratified by the White House yet. I would be surprised if they did change the strategy here. It's also concerning to a lot of people that even though Rex Tillerson is the Secretary of State, Jared Kushner has now been appointed, anointed, whatever you want to call it. He's looking into diplomatic affairs. Do you think this could be perhaps the beginning? Rex Tillerson is the Secretary of State. Jared Kushner has now been appointed, anointed, whatever you want to call it. He's looking into diplomatic affairs. Do you think this could be perhaps the beginning of more and more engagement on the part of the Trump administration to try and engage more? India, of course, is not going to take it. Clearly, they've said this is a bilateral issue and nothing else.
Well, I'm just going by the statements of President Trump as a candidate and subsequently as president. And he has been very focused on the issue of terror. Then I'm juxtaposing the fact that Pakistan has today become one of the key platforms for terror, one of the key breeding grounds for terror. So the only logical way you can pass Nikki Haley's statement, she is part of the Trump administration, and hopefully she does represent at least 10% of what the president believes.
You're saying they'll push on the mandate for terrorism, and that's how they'll engage
I
Pakistan?
Can only say that the problem facing India with Pakistan is Pakistan-sponsored terror. And the day that problem goes away, the situation in India and Pakistan will become normalized. Hopefully what Nikki Haley is meaning is that the US is going to be far more engaged in trying to knock some sense into Pakistan than was the case under Barack Obama's time and George Bush's time, both of whom gave Pakistan a free pass.
Right. Two things have happened. Pramit Pal Chaudahri, if I could get you into this conversation. Pramit, the fact that there was a conversation that took place between Nawaz Sharif and Donald Trump, after which there was a press statement that was put out by Pakistan saying that that Donald Trump had agreed on mediating, which of course the White House then came out and completely rejected the claims. And now we see a Pakistani journalist plugging that question to Nikki Haley. It seems like Pakistan is trying to drive the agenda on Indo Pak talks, trying to get US or push US into the talks.
Well, that has always been Pakistan's line. They believe that if they can get international intervention of some sort, then automatically this will work to their favor, or at least tilt the table away from India's preponderance of strength and diplomatic position. I actually don't think, I think we're overreaching when we look at Nikki Haley's statement. She does not call for mediation. She does not say that America no longer believes that this is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. All she says, and I think this is important, is to say that we will attempt to de-escalate any conflict going forward. There's a difference between saying that we want to mediate in the present state of affairs and saying that we will attempt to stop a conflict between India and Pakistan.
I agree with your point, Pramit, but she also says
have gone to war before recently.
We shouldn't wait for something to happen.
There was a conflict. America intervened.
Pramit, she also says we shouldn't wait for something to happen, indicating that they perhaps try and want to make something happen before it escalates, like you said, into conflict. And
adding to it, it was a specific question on Kashmir. It was a very specific question, Professor Nalapat.
I just want to say that there have been two approaches by individual US policymakers. One is to basically stand by while Pakistan indulges in a terrorist act and then tell India, please don't retaliate, please don't do any of the things that we would do. You're India, we're United States, you're different, please forgive Pakistan because you're bigger than Pakistan. The other is to proactively engage with Pakistan and prevent them from doing acts of terror. So the question is, frankly, does the Trump administration believe in the first kind of theorem that allow Pakistan to do what it likes, but then tell India to be restrained, or does it believe in proactively preventing Pakistan from proliferating as a supplier of
That's what I want to get Simon back in, because Simon has limited time with us. Simon, of course, the reason I mentioned Jared Kushner was because he's now been given charge of a newly created position in the White House. He'll be overseeing an overhaul on how American policy is made and implemented. Perhaps you can tell our viewers a bit more about this, and that's why I wanted to ask you whether or not the Trump administration has really formed the policy that they want to implement in South Asia and Southeast Asia, or whether these are just nascent noises coming out of an administration trying to find their center on these issues.
Well, on the issue of Jared Kushner, I mean, this is President Trump's son-in-law. He's married to President Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump, And on a daily basis here, his portfolio seems to grow. He's in charge of all sorts of different areas of US government policy now, to the point where no single human being could possibly manage all of the different projects that he's been assigned by his father-in-law. But that is a very clear indication of the esteem in which Donald Trump holds Jared Kushner, and the signal has gone out to countries all over the world, including, of course, both India and Pakistan, that if you want to get Donald Trump's attention in foreign policy terms, Jared Kushner is the channel through which you need to communicate. On the issue of policy more generally, it's far from clear that the Trump administration has thought in any great detail, in any degree of depth, about the kind of policy that it wants to pursue in the region. It, of course, pulled out of American participation in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. That sent a signal to some partners in the region of instability ahead. But what it replaces Barack Obama's pivot to the Asia-Pacific region with, very, very unclear at this point.
So, Simon, let me ask you this. When an administration is in place but has not firmed up its policies, they normally ask their bureaucrats, their representatives to not hold press conferences or hold low-key. They're not low-key over here. Nikki Haley has been, this is not the first time she's holding a press conference, and certainly not the first statement that she's making, which certainly seems like a faux pas. Russia, the statement on Russia was the first one, and now we see the statement on India, Indo Pak ties is also on Masood Azhar, which has riled China.
Look, you used a very important word there, normally. These are not normal times in Washington, D.C. The Trump administration does not obey the normal rules that have applied to America's geopolitical relationships internationally, and it also doesn't appear to have internalized the notion that words really matter. And one of the interesting aspects of this story is the sharp reaction from India after Nikki Haley's comments sends a very clear message to Trump administration officials that you can't be fast and loose with language in the way in which Nikki Haley may have been. She may not have been, but she may have been somewhat fast and loose in the language that she used without expecting some kind of blowback, in this case, from Delhi. So it does send a message to the Trump administration that words and phrases matter, but whether they are ready yet to internalize that message and become more disciplined about their own messaging, that's very, very unclear.
Right, Simon, words do matter, something the American media has been trying to tell Trump for over 4.5 months now. I'm not sure whether or not they'll internalize it in time. Thank you for joining us, Simon Marks from Washington, D.C. At this moment, we'll say goodbye to Simon Marks, but we will say hello to our other panelists. Vivek Katju, you've heard our correspondent there in Washington saying that this could very easily be described as something that hasn't really been firmed up yet. But there are rumblings in Washington. There is a lot of change coming to a White House. He mentioned this is not a normal White House. Things are done as they've never been done in the past. Do you think that Nikki Haley perhaps was trying to send out a feeler here, just to gauge reaction on how India and Pakistan would react to it? We know that India predictably has reacted quite starkly to it. Pakistan is always trying to get anyone involved, whoever they can find, in terms of issues like Kashmir or other bilateral issues between India and Pakistan.
Well, it could be a feeler, but there's no way of assessing that as yet. But Athar, I have a sense of deja vu, because even though the Trump administration doesn't act normally, yet if you see some previous administrations, they've always tried to explore possibilities at the beginning to see if they can mediate or be active in India-Pakistan issues. You recollect that at the beginning of Obama administration, he had appointed Holbrooke, and there was all this talk of Af, Pak and India, till we took a very firm stand, and it just became Af, Pak, and Holbrooke, with all his megalomania, realized that he'll get no purchase in Delhi. In fact, I recollect a meeting where I was present with Holbrooke, and of course the Foreign Secretary was there, when it was quite apparent that he had realized that that there is no question of intervening in India Pak. Having said that, let me also say that all American administrations have taken an interest in India Pak affairs with the objective of trying to ensure that the relations don't become inflamed, because that would hurt their interests. And
that tensions do not escalate to a point where it could come to a conflict. Now, I also want to introduce Sumit Ganguly. Vivek Katju, just give me a minute here. Professor Sumit Ganguly joins us from the University of Indiana. And I'll come back. Tensions do not escalate to a point where it could come to a conflict. Now, I also want to introduce Sumit Ganguly. Vivek Katju, just give me a minute here. Professor Sumit Ganguly joins us from the University of Indiana. And I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Vivek Katju. Just to get a sense, Professor Ganguly, of what you make of this statement by Nikki Haley. She is, by most accounts, not the senior-most American diplomat, really. She's been governor of one state as a part of a Republican Party candidature here. But how much weightage would you give to a statement like America is looking to find its place in making sure that whether or not they have a role in de-escalating tensions between India and Pakistan? Can the Trump administration really afford that right now?
No, it certainly cannot afford that right now, for the very simple reason that they haven't even appointed an Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia. The position on the ambassadorship is still open. There is still no Deputy Secretary of State. Under these circumstances, I am quite taken aback by Nikki Haley's statement. It might have been, as Mr. Katju was suggesting, a simple routine statement that other administrations have also parroted in the past in their early days. And she may have dusted off some file that she had found and had chosen to make that remark. But quite frankly, I think this is a rather ill-considered part, especially being of Indian origin. She should have some understanding, even though she was the governor of a minor state and not particularly conversant with foreign affairs.
Clearly.
She should have had some common sense and not made a statement that is potentially inflammatory.
Right, Sumit, let's just get in a few the political views on this very story. Sanjay Jha of the Congress Party is also Arvind Gupta of the BJP join us. Sanjay, if I could come to you first. A lot of engagement in the initial days of the Trump administration by the Indian government. We saw the Foreign Secretary go there. We saw National Security go there and a security advisor go there, not once but twice over. Do you think they've missed the plot of trying to reach out to the U.S. administration and get the message right across to the U.S. government?
See, the truth is that if you look at Mr. Trump's foreign policy, I still think it's a work in progress, and I think they are learning it through trial and error. You know, if you look at the determination of the administration to completely reverse everything that President Barack Obama stood for. So whether it's Iran, definitely Russia, you even saw it in case of one China policy. There have been a lot of flip-flops, and clearly, they need to be a lot more pragmatic and far-sighted, because foreign policy is not something that has to have a remarkable change when an administration shifts. But it can. I mean, it can't be ruled out. What I think is causing some consternation, and to some extent I would feel perturbed, is the fact that Nikki Haley's statement tends to allude towards the fact that America might want to be proactive. You see, when somebody makes a statement saying we want to prevent a conflict at the early stages, etc., I think what they are trying to tell you is that it may have an interventionist intent. So I think it's very important for Mr. Modi's government to actually nip these speculations in the bud. I think there is a Shimla agreement. Pakistan and India have to talk all bilateral issues, disputes, whatever they may be, one-on-one. So I think it's important to send a very explicit categorical message to the U.S. government. Because don't forget that, you have a very unpredictable, they are trying all kinds of experimentation.
Arvind Gupta, go ahead, please.
Policy. It can be a little disconcerting, I believe.
Yeah, so I think all of us are saying the same thing, but I would like to reiterate 2-3 very important points that happened today over the course of the day. Is that while Nikki Haley was drawn into the statement, because of a question from a Pakistani journalist, I think, we are also reading a lot into her statement. As everybody has said, I tend to agree that the Trump administration has really not put in the right people. It's a very skeleton staff right now. And because of that, the policy is really not firmed up. I think I tend to agree with Sanjay Jha and everybody else on this actually. And
the US ambassador to UN.
Is that it's really a work in progress. No, can I complete that? And I think the very important thing here is the terse and stern statement, immediate statement that has been given by the Indian establishment to this so-called intention, if at all we can put that, from Nikki Haley. But India has made its stand very, very clear. It's a bilateral issue. It will continue to stay a bilateral issue.
I just want to get Professor Nalapat's sense on this here.
I think Pakistan should focus more
Arvind Gupta, you mentioned the kind of language India used almost immediately after the story came forth. And Professor Nalapat, 3 pointers that we got from the MEA, I think the most important one I'll highlight right now is the mandate on terror. It says, this is the MEA spokesperson saying, the mandates concerning terrorism emanating from Pakistan that continue to be the single biggest threat to peace in our region and beyond. So if India plays it right, even if they have plans or intentions of trying to be proactive, we keep them to where we need them. We push for the mandate on terrorism. The other issues, every other issue, we do bilaterally. That could work out to India's advantage.
Well, actually, I thought what can work out to India's advantage would be if Donald Trump remains Donald Trump. Now, frankly, Nikki Haley on several issues reflects the views of the East Coast Atlanticist establishment. On Russia, for example, very clearly,
but anyway,
on several other issues, possibly India, Pakistan, your Atlanticist establishment, frankly, gives Pakistan virtually a free pass on terror, but then calls upon India to always be restrained when an act of terror is committed on India. So I think Nikki Haley needs to go through a learning curve and integrate more with the Trump worldview. The Trump worldview puts global terror at the front and center of the problems, along with 2 or 3 other issues. And in that, it's exactly on the same page as India. So my view is these kind of, if I may say so, miscommunications will not basically detract from the fundamental point that on core issues, India and the US under Trump, India under Modi, and the US under Trump.
Go back to one sentence that Trump had mentioned while he was candidate Trump. And Pramit Pal Chaudahri, first of all, do you agree with Professor Nalapat here? And also, when asked during the campaign trail, Trump had said that he would, and I quote him right now, he said, I would love to play a role if both nations want me to. He had very quickly added that sentence when asked about this specifically. So even he understands or understood at that point that it's not really a walk in the park, even for someone like Trump. This is a very, very sensitive, a very old issue, a very old conflict. He had made that clear that if both nations want, he would like to play a role. Clearly, India will never agree to such a role. So most of this is semantics there.
Yes, and also keep in mind not only that, after Trump made that statement, the person in charge of South Asia in his transition team, Lisa Curtis of the Heritage Foundation, then issued an article in the Heritage newspaper, Daily Signal, saying that what Mr. Trump means by that is that Pakistan must give up and dismantle its terrorism infrastructure, and made it very clear that as far as the Trump administration would be concerned, what they wanted India and Pakistan better relationship, at the heart of it was Pakistan giving up on terrorism. And Curtis, I should add, is tipped to become the person in the National Security Council, which Nikki Haley mentions will be at the heart of the policy, to handle South Asia.
Right. Ambassador Katju, if I could bring you in, the fact of the matter is that we can discuss a lot about overreach and whether if we are blowing things out of proportion, but the fact is Nikki Haley is the US ambassador to the United Nations. There was a specific brief, and if there aren't officials in specific departments handling South Asia, then Nikki Haley will have to answer for the faux pas that she's committing and making in or at the United Nations.
That's true, Geeta, but that's something which is part of the domestic U.S. administration process. She is new to the game, quite clearly. But the important thing from my viewpoint is this, will the Americans put pressure on India to begin a dialogue with Pakistan, even using the ruse that that dialogue can be on terror? I think it is here that we've got to watch out, and that Mr. Modi's government has to clearly indicate to the Americans that till we have sufficient evidence from the Pakistanis that they are actually going to turn back on terror on a permanent basis, we are not going to engage them in a meaningful way, either to enhance cooperation or for addressing issues. The question of contact for humanitarian purposes
before we close this particular point, whether or not before we close this particular point, whether or not America will leverage Professor Ganguly or limit its role, whatever might be going through their heads right now, the new Trump administration, that they could perhaps facilitate or push either of the parties towards the talking table and limit perhaps, because we've seen past administrations right down to the time of Bill Clinton, the early 90s, the mid-90s, and every other administration afterwards. They don't really mind the idea of goading both sides to talk at least. Now, times have been tough really way back in South Asia. India and Pakistan have not had the kind of relationship that could push both of them to the table right now. Do you believe that's, as Ambassador Katju says, where India needs to watch out? Because that leverage, that pressure could certainly be used by any administration, Republican or Democrat.
Given the state of complete disarray that this administration finds itself in, particularly with the investigations about Russia's involvement in the American election and its inability to place key people in a range of positions in the Department of Defense and the Department of State, I find it rather irrational to think that the administration could actually focus on India and Pakistan. Already, Jared Kushner, who has absolutely no experience in government or foreign affairs, is dealing with the opioid crisis in the country, and in addition to that, given the portfolio of dealing with the Middle East. I mean, this is frankly laughable. Under these circumstances, for the administration to try and take on the contentious Pakistani conflict is basically a fool's errand.
All right, Sumit Ganguly, of course, nobody can disagree with that. There is a lot being said and written about how Jared Kushner is occupying the office he's been given, which is sort of an overhaul of the entire way the American White House works. But we do thank you, Professor Sumit Ganguly, for joining us. And perhaps as we go along, we should start treating more and more, unless they get a structure in place, of course. And I wouldn't really call it a faux pas, Geeta, would I? Nikki Haley, I think she got trapped into a question.
Yes, she walked straight into that question, but the fact is, Athar, at the end of the day, India's position is very clear. Talks and terror can't go hand in hand. Pakistan will have to desist from terror. The only point over here is whether Pakistan can come to the talking table on terror or not. And
I believe, of course, we should be prepared for more such. I wouldn't call it a gaffe, but such slip of tongues coming into the Trump administration, given the kind of troubles they're having back home domestically. Thank you for joining us, Professor Sumit Ganguly, Pramit Pal Chaudahri, Sanjay, Ambassador Katju, Arvind Gupta, Professor Nalapat, and my colleague Geeta Mohan. We'll take a quick break right now. When we come back, we'll have another debate for you. And that, of course, is a good one. The Skulls and Bone protest today. Some relief for UP farmers. Will other states follow UP's lead? We'll find out.